Yeah.
It's a very like, be honest. Whereas
Okay, I think we should
17 more meetings.
just start. I don't need to know the number. Just go ahead and start. Point when it's ready. Hello, everyone. I'm Craig Stover. I'm the Executive Director of Allens Lane Art Center. Welcome to ArtShow. I have with me tonight Leo Sewell, my guest this evening. Just a few words first to let you know, we do have safety measures in place for the pandemic. We have open windows, we have fans blowing in opposite directions and air filters and cleaning. So we've done lots of that. Even though we're without masks this evening, we have plenty of safety measures in place. So thank you very much for joining us. Leo and I are going to have a little chat, and a little after halfway through, we're going to be fielding questions from everybody. So if you have any questions, at the bottom of your screen, there's a chat feature. Just click on that, and then you can list your questions, and we'll see how many we can take. So with that, welcome. Thanks for coming by today.
Pleasure to be here.
Thrilled to have you. So we had you in an exhibit here at Allens Lane about a decade ago.
It does seem, yeah.
And it still sticks in my mind.
Okay.
So I'm thrilled to have you. So I'm going to start where I normally start about, I love to start at the beginning. Like how did you get your life in the arts? How did your life in the arts begin?
It began with the objects, really. There was a dump near my house, and I would go and pick trash, pick junk, and drag it home and play with it, mostly disassemble it. And my parents would tell me that you got to build, you can't just take things apart. And it wasn't about art, but I did start assembling found objects, and it was just a joy, and the joy is still with me. Just each object and what it is and what can be done with it and how it can be mannered. And then eventually I did go to college and I learned about art.
Did you go to college for art?
Not at all.
Okay.
I went to University of Delaware to be a chemist.
All right.
But I was exposed finally, and I thought, oh Jesus, what I'm doing, I could call art. And then eventually, we're talking about the 60s, I, under some influence, committed my life to trying to make a life out of assembling junk and to be a junk sculptor.
Was that understanding in school, or were you out of school when you finally made that commitment?
No, I was in school, and I got a bachelor's in economics, and then I had such an exciting teacher in the history of art. And so I stayed to get a master's in art history, and that changed. That guy was so exciting, and he turned me on so much. I actually told my wife at one point about this, and she said, well, you should go thank him. And it turned out he was in Philadelphia still. And I went over, and he was this big, tall, gay guy. Oh, you work your whole life hoping to hear this, and we just hugged each other. This is pre-COVID. And so he was instrumental in that as well. And then I did other things for 20 years while I was trying to establish myself as an artist. And, but for the last 30 plus years, I've been a full-time sculptor.
So the other things, when you were done school, did you move back to Philadelphia? Were you in?
Yeah, well, my first wife went to Penn Graduate School, and I realized how good the junk is in Philadelphia.
We got some high quality. We're world famous for our junk.
Well, you don't want to be in Phoenix. You want an industrial city on the decline, and it's in the streets. It's there in abandoned buildings, and so I was back as a child, groveling in the Navy dump and enjoying it.
So the studio you have now, have you always had just the one studio, or have you had?
No, I had a progression of studios.
Okay.
The one I have now is since '86.
Okay. And it's in West Philly.
Yeah,
I had the privilege of going to that studio.
yeah.
And I'm sure I'm not the only one that sits.
Yeah.
mouth agape
I
about
get, I
everything.
get guess. Yeah.
And you're kind of probably like blasé about it because for you, it's just home, right?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. I mean, I could tell you, one time I counted, like if I find an object and I bring it home, there's so many ways that it can be categorized. There's 2,200 wrong places I can put that.
Oh, yeah.
that on, although they overlap. I mean, because there's, there's brass and then there's gold tone and then
Right.
there's things that can be toes. And so it's an extensive collection.
Yeah, I would imagine so. Do you have like a routine, like a materials search routine? Like, do you go out like once a week to look for stuff, or is it just you're on all the time? I'd be curious.
I'm on somewhat all the time. On the way here, I stop by friends
Uh-huh.
on Westview that they're moving and they had some stuff.
Uh-huh.
And so I have been at it long enough. Sometimes I come home and there's a bucket by my door. But early on, like in the 70s, I had maps of the city divided in days of the week.
Really?
And I
With a trash night.
yeah. And I would do that early mornings. And actually, I think my wife married me because she enjoys going after junk. And it's really the best thing we do together.
You call it junk, and I'm sure to most
Reclaimed.
people it's like that.
Yeah.
But, I think I can imagine that you probably don't really think of it as junk. You think of it probably as color, shape, texture, object. Does that go through your mind? I mean,
Yeah, you're right. But the
For all intents.
guts of it, I want to think that they're objects that have truly been discarded and that I'm giving them another life.
have you ever used something that's brand new in your work?
Next question.
Yeah, okay. So let me talk to you about your methodology. I think is really fascinating because I've seen the variety of sculptures that you make, not just in terms of size, but just in terms of subject matter. Can you walk me through the process about? Is it lightning strikes for you? Or is it like, I'm going to make, 20 ducks in a row? When you're about to start something, how does that usually happen?
Well, I maintain an inventory.
Okay.
And I'll say 20 different forms.
Right.
And if one of the forms sells, I generally, will make that again unless there's some pending commission. And then I'm always expanding that as well. This sort of monochrome approach I've only done, 12 years or something.
Mm-hmm.
And that's led me, I'll make a crow just out of black objects. So in a sense, I'm doing the same thing again and again, and I'm also doing new.
So it's there. I would almost say that it's like a series because you're using the same form as sort of like a mount, I would say, but then you're changing.
It's not veneered. I mean, everything's built from the inside out,
Right.
and all out of reclaimed objects. I do buy the fasteners. And if you really want to know how it's made, you can buy one and take it apart.
Like an IKEA project.
I guess.
Get a big bag of
a
deconstructed Sewell.
I mean,
like that.
Traditional sculpture is subtractive, meaning you start with a stone or the wood and you take away everything that isn't the giraffe or whatever. Right. And for the last 100+ years, there's been additive sculpture, right, which is like architecture or furniture or cars or anything. But a lot of what I'm doing is subtractive in the sense that this piece right here, in order to fit as I want it, needs to be subtracted on the back side. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of fitting in that way. So there's There's subtraction and addition. I'm just saying.
In your mind, say you're looking for a certain piece, do you go hunting for the piece, or do you just happen to find the piece and say, hey, this, or is that a combination of both maybe?
I'm always putting in inventory, but if I put in inventory in an intelligent way, I can retrieve it.
Okay.
And I mean, some collections get so deep. I have a sort of a rule that I should turn the bucket over every 2 years, so I really do know what's in there.
Right. You know, the reason I ask is I find sometimes artists are able to have so much going on in their heads, like an inventory of, you know, if I'm talking to a painter, they'll talk about an inventory of marks or mark making or color or something like that. So the idea that you have what's in your studio in your head would be fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, there are over 200,000 objects plus fasteners. So I have to organize it in an intelligent way. And I have piles, just say brass. I have piles of brass that is thick enough to be welded. And then I have piles of brass that's lighter and can be assembled more in this fashion. And the same is true of stainless and aluminum. And then there's the polychrome. And I have a large box of just red objects because occasionally I make a red apple. And then clear funded drawers are very helpful as well.
Oh, plastics, I would imagine.
Yeah, plastics.
So I want to talk a little bit about, you know, the different forms that you use. I do notice, obviously, lots of animals that you're doing.
Yeah,
right?
You can't beat nature.
No.
I mean, you just can't beat it, you know? I mean,
do you have is there one in particular, not a one sculpture, but one type of sculpture that you find the most enjoyable to make? Is there something that you have like just makes you feel happy when you're
well,
doing
you
it?
mentioned it. I'm very involved with ducks, this sort of long necked duck.
Right.
I was given a plastic form of it, 30 years ago, and I've made it in sterling silver. I've made it in stainless. I've made the eggs in gold, and I've made ducks. I can really duck up. I mean, I've made 10-foot ducks, 4 or 5 foot ducks. Groucho Marx, he realized that it's the funny thing. A duck, remember the duck would come down?
Okay. What's that?
Yeah.
You
So
bet your life, or you one of those?
Yeah. I think that's it. Yeah. It's before your time.
Yeah. Right.
Yes.
Yeah, spring chicken. But then, so that I can understand, because I do love the shape of that duck. You know, that sort of nature form into it. So I can imagine that.
And it makes you smile.
Yeah. When you're working in your studio, tell me a little bit about, do you have specific rituals that you do? And here's what I'm saying is,
I'm not going to tell you all that.
when you're in your studio, do you listen to music? Do you need silence? Can you stand it if somebody else is in the studio? Does that bring it to a stop?
I have the radio or music or something on almost all the time. And a lot of talk radio. I mean, once I know what I'm doing, it's funny, I cannot read if there's radio on, but I can work and concentrate in the shop.
Not a problem.
Yeah, it's working.
Can you work with other people in there?
Yeah, not so much. I mean, I've brought in help sometimes, but then I'm so spoiled, you know, that if I have help, then I'm working to their hours and their needs of many ways. Barbara, my wife, helps me a lot, especially in the non-shop aspects of it, the internet and bookkeeping and such.
Is there a difference? And I'll be a little shocked if you said no, but is there a difference from when you first started down this path, when you, like the first duck you ever made, to the ducks that you make now? Is it the same exact experience, or is it, what's the difference? Is there a difference now?
In terms of the visceral joy, it's stunningly the same.
Okay.
Technically, it certainly evolved. And if you study art, and especially architecture, as a new form comes about, it's very bold. And as it progresses through different practitioners, it becomes much more surface. As Baroque becomes Adamesque, you know, in architecture as an example. And I've been very aware of that throughout. And my early work is gutsier. It isn't as smooth, but it's maybe even more joyful. And I've refined it. That's all. I've refined it, and the I know what I'm doing and what materials will do, and even choosing materials. I try not to use anything that will oxidize, and I understand my plastics and which ones decay over time, and so
you know your materials.
Yeah. So my product, I say this will last if, like a painting, if you treat it like a painting, it will last quite well. Some of the work is for outdoors, most is not. But there is a grasp for immortality in anything you make.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So you had mentioned a little bit about Baroque, and we've talked about other artists. I am curious, do you look at other artwork as either inspiration or just for amusement? Are there other artists that you find fascinating?
Yeah, I'm not so much a good customer, Marcel, I would be impossible without Marcel Duchamp, and I know that, and the pop movement. The one line I remember was that Andy Warhol explored one bedroom in the mansion that Duchamp built, and to compare myself to either of them is ridiculous, but he did open an area that I live in.
I can see that. When you go to the museum, assuming that you do go to the museum.
I do.
Can you look at the same pieces by Duchamp year after year?
Every time I go in the PMA, I will go back to that room.
Yeah.
And I even love the puns. A lot of my work, I try to get a pun in. And then I've developed a line of work. I'll try to make something that is the person's name. I even considered what would be a Craig Stover, I was unsuccessful. The last one, there's this guy, Joe Laurie. So I got this little truck and I put coffee beans in it, and I do that I love doing that, to have a visual pun and because it's play, and that's really what I'm about. I'm about play. I'm about happiness, or joy is a better word.
It's really apparent if nobody's told you. I mean, your work is extremely fun. It's engaging and it is joyful. So and that's, I think, what I'm really attracted to by it. I am curious that a lot of artists that I know often will, for lack of a better term, hide things in their work. So you did talk about names or other things. Do you have any sort of secrets that you put in your work?
I put a rattle, and pieces smaller than this, a piece that you can do this with. For the last 20 years or so, there's a piece by Duchamp called With Hidden Noise, and the metal plates on the...
Is that a direct reference to
Absolutely.
it? That is fantastic.
Yeah, and the fact that, it's childlike, so it's like a rattle for a kid.
Right.
Yeah.
But people who purchase your work don't necessarily know that.
I try to tell them, but I'm not always the person that hands it to them. So, and it's nice that something else will be discovered too.
So tell me, what are you currently working on? What's in your studio? It's in construction. Well, actually, let me back up for a second. I am curious, do you work with just one piece at a time?
Generally, but not always. The piece I'm working on now is the American Eagle on a half globe. It's about life-size eagle, and it will have a lot of the badges like buttons, like election badges and stuff. I think there's a commission that I need to do soon, so that probably will be set aside to do the commission. But
is most of your work commission based, or
it's pretty even. It's pretty even.
Half?
Yeah. The one thing I do, I have a place upstate, it's Eaglesmere, and every summer I do a spec piece, a larger spec piece, and then I have a theme party for it. I made a 80-inch rhinoceros all out of silver plate, and then we had a little section of that play by Nescu. Yeah, you know, everybody saying rhinoceros, 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 and then I rolled it out, you know, in the sunlight. And this year I made my copper-coated colt, about a 2/3 scale horse, all out of copper objects. But like everything else, I had to scale the opening to the situation. But it found a proper home as well. That's all.
I think when I talk to people about your work, aside from your ears burning, I try to first I try to describe it, and then I always end up back at a public piece that you've done. And being that we're in Philadelphia, I will first mention the Please Touch Museum.
Oh yeah, the big torch.
So they'll know about the big torch.
Yeah, and
but
the elephant's there.
The elephant, they still have the elephant.
Yeah.
So it depends on their age range.
I know they got to who have had a 5-year-old. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And it's funny because they immediately change their whole their facial expression changes, because I think the whimsy is there, that in their memory, and they still get the and I still get more people for elephants. Probably because I'm older, but than the current,
on 22nd Street.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I have a client today that came to me and said, "Will you make an elephant for my son with his things?" You know, and then it becomes a sort of a keepsake, and may his children fight over it, I'd like to say.
Yeah. Did the commissions find you? Like, is it a snowballing effect? Because somebody had a commission and then,
Somewhat, yeah. I mean, in this little community upstate, there's this other family that wants a piece now, and Barbara says, they just want to be part of the action with their friends, you know, and she's starting to question, you know, what's going on here? I mean, just to make these little, I mean, what am I doing? I mean, you know, beyond making people smile,
right?
You know, then they have another thing in their house, and you know, sometimes it stimulates conversation. I remember complaining about this to a friend of mine. I said, they're just little things that people love. And he said, well, what did Renoir do? And I thought that was very flattering, you know, because it isn't too complicated. That's all I'm saying.
Before we continue, I want to remind everybody that we will be fielding some questions. So if you have a question for Leo, in the chat box below, just type in your question and it'll come to us. So we'll be able to hopefully take a few questions. So tell me, what did you bring us today?
Well, I have my boxer friend.
Okay.
You know, he's so formal, and most of the animals, you tilt their heads, you know, or have a little of this, but I see him as a straightforward, formal, sort of a...
He's on guard.
Yeah, he's a foyer piece. Actually, I made Hal Linden, the actor, you know, hit me maybe 30 years ago, and he wanted the boxer. I'd never made a boxer. And so it became a favorite form. I mean, they're short-haired. Like, to make a poodle or a collie, which I have done, but not as successfully.
Mhm.
You know, hair is, well, hair is very difficult for me in many ways, but
We won't go into that.
yeah, but it's difficult for most sculpture,
Yeah.
you know, casting or stone. But so to find a form that is handsome.
Mhm.
And the other thing about you want verticality.
Mhm.
I mean, if you make a crocodile,
Mhm.
it should be a wall piece. I mean, you know, first of all, to give up horizontal space
Mhm.
is not desired. And, you know, cathedrals and monuments are vertical.
Mhm.
So you want pieces that have that aspect. I mean, when you do the human form, for me, it's just a little too much. I made a lot of
Mhm.
standing figures in the 70s and 80s, but it's just a little too much in your face.
Mhm.
I do female torsos now.
Mhm.
And then I look for other vertical forms like a penguin.
Mhm.
Um, one of the parties in Eaglesmere was a heron. I did a heron twice life size, so it's a 6-foot heron.
Mhm.
Um, size does matter,
Mhm.
and vertical is good. That's what I'm
Mm.
saying.
I think one of the other things that I enjoy about your sculpture is I really like sculpture that is unpredictable as you walk around it.
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
new discovery.
Yeah, and I think it's fascinating that you found a way that I can kind of imagine what the other side of this looks like,
Uh-huh.
but I know when I go over there, it'll be completely different just because of all the textures that you have here and this.
No, thank you.
So I'm assuming that's
Yeah,
half the
no, the
secret
fact
sauce.
that these toes are made completely differently than these toes. I
Right,
love that. I
right.
love that. And, you know, I don't want my dinner plates to match or the
Uh-huh.
forks or the two shoes are the same. But the variation on a theme is a glorious thing as
Yeah.
well.
You don't name these, do you?
Some I do, but he doesn't have a name.
Do you ever keep any for yourself that like, oh, I'm never going to give this one up? Do you have anything like that?
Not much. I mean, when we had like a 6-month-old, my daughter, when she was 6 months, and I used her as a model, and this lady came in and said how much, and Barbara was not happy.
Okay.
You know, it's the joy of making it.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
So I want to talk just a little bit more briefly about this piece. If anybody has any questions, please make sure to chat now, sort of question time.
Okay.
So we had touched on earlier talking about sort of the monochromatic of this.
Uh-huh.
So
Narrow palette.
and you've been doing it, true, narrow palette. You've been only doing that though for the last decade or so?
Yeah, maybe more. I had a friend, great artist, but really couldn't pull his life together. And he collected junk off the street. And I went over there one day and he had the junk arranged by color.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like some thrift stores do with clothes.
Right.
And I thought, oh my, you know, and I've you know, exploited that thought. I have the Soviet symbol, you know, the star,
Mhm.
all red objects with the hammer and sickle and gold, instead of just the hodgepodge.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever see yourself, I know that you're considered a sculptor, exploring any other artistic endeavors or any other disciplines, I would say? Do you ever have a pull to just, you know, I'm going to do some drawing today or maybe some, you know, do some prints or anything like that? Sing a song?
Wordplay.
Wordplay.
Yeah. But I try to pull the wordplay in. You have this art center. Maybe we could have a visual pun exhibit.
Uh-huh.
So that the object, you know, presented, and whether it's mannered or not, would be a visual pun.
how many Scrabble sets do you have?
Well, I don't really get it.
I'm just imagining because of the word puns and because you do.
No,
like
I'm
a lot
not
of
gonna.
words.
I'm not gonna have letters.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I
No,
was
it's
more
like
of the visual. I see.
Joe Laurie kind
I
of thing.
see.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
curious. Is there any particular piece of junk that when you come across it, it's like the holy grail of things that are hard to find?
Um, yeah, well, I'm after convex
Really?
because that's what nature is.
Okay.
You know, you can get a concave form,
Right.
but nature is convex. I mean, animals,
Right.
the animal world, and like if I get a wooden bowl, and all the interesting aspect of it is the inside, and it's very upsetting, you know, because it's got to be convex.
When you have, say, an exhibit or something like this, I think you had mentioned this a decade ago. Sorry if I'm not getting this right. Afterwards, do you get people that come up and donate stuff to you? Do you find that it happens that way?
It does. I mean, believe me, I exist to give your objects life again, and I would like to use this opportunity to solicit, you know, discarded interesting objects for Leo.
So, okay, $1 million question. Have you ever considered on the outside of your studio some form of a drop box? You know, something that, you know, like those the midnight sack of money drop box. Because you don't want anybody to steal it, right?
Yeah, but I would be afraid that, you know, some people will just start putting their trash in there.
Oh yeah,
You know, refuse would come. There's so many different words about discard, but I never considered that, but it didn't take me long to say no.
Well, you make me think. I wonder how, you know, if they say the people that live above the Arctic, they have like, you know, 200 words for snow. I wonder if Philadelphians have 200 words for garbage. Yeah, there's a book deal in there somewhere.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, refuse.
So I did get one question.
All right.
Is anything inside the dog? What's inside the dog? Like treats that you could take from out of the leg. I think that's what it says.
No, it's not that cute. It's not that cute. There's something like an armature made out of reclaimed objects. I mean, it has to hold together. So you got to think, but no, there's no secret passage. Yeah, and there's no electricity and nothing lights up. It's static sculpture.
There was one that you made that was a pterodactyl, I remember.
Yeah.
And did the wings slightly move on that?
No, it would move from airflow.
Airflow.
Yeah.
And you would not consider any of your work like a mobile. They're all stabiles for lack of better word.
Yeah. The only mobile thing would be that pterodactyl.
The wind itself.
Yeah.
So is the Liberty Torch the biggest thing that you've ever done?
Easily. Yeah, that's 40 feet.
Yeah, that took a while to make.
Yeah, it took a while. And Please Touch was very helpful in getting stuff, and they actually made the steel armature for me. That place is still closed, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, pandemic, and well, even beforehand, I think they were having trouble.
They certainly had financial trouble.
Yeah, it's tough in the arts of Philadelphia. So,
well,
I'm thrilled to see that you're, thriving and doing so well. I'm always glad to see that you have new sculptures coming out the game plank. I do want to encourage everybody out there, if you have not been to Leo's website, please do. You have a fantastic website. There's a whole selection of artworks that are on there.
Art of the studio. I mean, I am available.
So you encourage people to make appointments?
Yeah, they could make a contribution when they come.
That's great. So what he's saying is you must bring something convex when you come. That's the password to get in.
It's nice if you do. Right. You're welcome otherwise. You're welcome.
But, well, I wanted to thank you very much for coming by. I think we didn't have any other questions, but it's a pleasure having you come by again today.
Well, you're a good interviewer.
It was great to talk to you about your work. I can't see what else comes next. And I want to encourage everybody out there to please go to Leo's website, check it out. As every artist in Philadelphia, I can attest to, ask them questions, reach out to them, ask for a studio tour, see what other galleries, if they're being represented by. Sometimes people I find they're a little hesitant to reach out to artists, but you know, every artist I know is more than welcome.
Yeah, it's part of our
talk
gig.
about their
I mean,
art.
we live for you.
Yeah, please do. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. I really appreciate your coming this evening. Thanks for tuning into Allen's Lane Art Show. And I hope to see you again next week. Thank you very much.